Kei ngā kora o rātou mā tēnei te mihi ki a koutou. Ko Mihingarangi a hau nau mai ki te ahi kāroa o ngā take whai tikanga o te wā. Welcome to Party People, funded through the Public Interest Journalism Fund. As you can see, we have finally made it through to broadcasting quarantine and have returned to the sweet green pastures of RNZ studios here in Tāmaki Makaurau. Joining us on this most auspicious occasion is the young buck of Māori political commentating, former National MP and proud shore boy, Dan Bidois, tēnā koe.
Kia ora.
And of course, te pūru o te waimana, the old bull of the Party People paddock, political campaigner Shane Te Pau, tēnā kōrua.
Kia ora. Kia ora.
Well, papa te whae te tiri, hiko te uira, it's been thunder and lightning in the weather and in politics in the last 36 hours, 24 hours. The PM's press release said it would be, her cabinet reshuffle would be minor, but it was much more than that. Let's talk about Chris Whawhoi. He leaves his positions of broadcasting, justice and immigration. He leaves in the middle of the most significant broadcasting reform possibly in our history. Dan, what do you make of his departure midway through the TVNZ-RNZ merger?
Yeah, well, it certainly doesn't help with the merger going on. And if you look at stats of mergers, anywhere from 70 to 80% of mergers fail. So, to have a minister leave halfway through doesn't bode well for the governance and making sure the merger is successful. So certainly not good, but look, his heart wasn't in it. He wanted to go.
That stat, is that public mergers?
So that's Harvard Business Review. That's basically on all mergers that they've studied, and their finding is that most mergers fail, essentially. So to have a minister leave halfway through, it's not good. So look, it's going to be key to make sure the new minister comes in and asks the right questions and make sure they are holding this board accountable, this establishment board accountable for that. So look, hey, I know Chris, he's a really good guy. Clearly just wants to spend more time with his whānau, so good on him. But he certainly leaves at a tough time for his portfolios. Immigration, he's bit of a mess at the moment, so there's going to be a lot to do for Michael Wood in that role coming up.
Ka pai, I was going to challenge the figures, but I realised that he's the Harvard graduate of all three of us, so I'll believe you.
Yeah.
So Willie Jackson, he's another former broadcaster.
Yeah.
He'll replace him. Is he up for the challenge?
Of course he is, but I think that the part that Daniel has missed out, he's been the Associate Minister of Broadcasting. His hands have been all over this and his baby has been the public broadcasting platform and funding. He was involved in the game for many years. He'll know the key protagonist. He is a champion of public broadcasting. He's worked on this side of the camera, the other side of the camera. I think it will be seamless. The other thing is that Willie is a very good negotiator, and he will not be afraid of democracy. He will ask the questions that need to be asked. So I think the transition from Whawhoi to Jackson will be seamless.
He's now in charge of the entire sector, Minister Jackson. Could it make it easier? Could this be one of the successful mergers?
Well, look, that's the rationale, I guess, from the Prime Minister. From what I understand of Willie, he's a really nice guy, but he's a bit of a showman as well. So he'll need to, I think, display.
He's a broadcaster.
He's a broadcaster, right? So he's certainly got all the experience, but he needs more than that. He needs to bring all of that to the fore to make sure he's asking the right questions and to make sure that he's holding the establishment board accountable so that ultimately this is successful. And what does success look like for this merger? It's not just about upholding the interests of the Fourth Estate and the independence and the objectivity. It's also about making sure the taxpayers get value for money, that there's things like online is very clear, that the public funding system is clear and better. It's got to be better, and that this process goes smoothly. So look, I wish him luck, but it's not a small job in any feat.
Ka pai. Chris Whawhoi, he's also vacating those portfolios for justice and immigration, the big ones. So Justice going to Kiritapu Allen. She's got a law background. She understands the system. Is this a good, strong move?
Yeah, it is, and it's a slow move up the system for Kiritapu. That will be, I think, one of the top 4 leaders, either during this term of this particular government or after. Tides come in, tides come out, and Labour is back again. She's got a very strong justice background, not only technically, legally, but also grassroots. So I think she's ready for it. There's been no controversies, no issues in terms of other portfolios she's had. And this is a woman who only a year or so ago was on death's door. So, she's a resilient sort, as Kiritapu Allen, and I think she'll do the job well.
He's putting her in the top 4. What do you think?
Look, I rate Kitty. She's a likeable person. She's got skills. She's got intelligence. And as Shane said, she's dealt with a lot, and that's, I think, led to her having a more resilient outlook on life. So I think, hey, look, she is an up-and-coming person in the Labour Party, and it'll be interesting to see how she takes on new portfolios.
Why do you think they chose her over someone like a safe pair of hands like David Parker or Kelvin Davis?
Oh, look, I think it's probably a little bit of giving opportunities to rising stars. There's probably an influence from the Labour Māori caucus in there as well. And again, she's got the skills to do the job, as does Labour Minister David Parker, but he's going to be reasonably busy as well. So I think there's probably just sharing the deck chairs around a little bit.
Yeah, we're all going to be busy.
Also, I think that if you name 2, I had on my little Radio Wātea show, if I can give that a plug, Kelvin, for the first time, said that, yes, he is going to stand in Te Tai Tokerau. I wouldn't be surprised if someone like David Parker, who's been a minister for 2 terms, and then even in the last government was a minister. I think he'll be one of those that probably will take Chris Whawhoi and at the next sort of reshuffle will leave, and that's probably why.
All the reckons from.
And that's
Shane
why you just got to think about it. 3 terms as a minister, sooner or later people got to turn on to move over his age, all that sort of thing. So I think he'll be the cohort of minister that will leave, because you have to have a 4 or 5 sort of real clear-outs before you face the next election.
Yeah. So leaving alongside Chris Whawhoi is the long-serving Speaker of the House, Trevor Mallard. He's served for 35 years as an MP. What will he be remembered for, Dan?
Well, look, I'm more inclined to believe and run with Audrey Young's opinion on this, which is, look, Trevor Mallard's probably 80% good, 20% bad, and unfortunately he'll probably be remembered for the 20% that he did wrong as a Member of Parliament and also as Speaker of the House. He's had so many issues.
What did he do wrong?
Well, the protests, the way he's handled the protests, the clear bias as a Speaker of the House. I mean, from what I remember of him, if point blank is the punch up he had with Tau Henare many years ago, and yet then he was put in charge of this bullying review and trying to overhaul that, and he was the biggest bully really in the Parliament. So, look, I'm sure he's done a lot of good. I just think that's going to be clouded with that 20% that he's done. And unfortunately, that's politics. And
finally, I think you probably disagree on something on Party People. Shane, what will he be remembered for?
Well, I've never been a fan. He knows it. He's not a fan of mine. I'm not a fan of his. I thought that putting on the music might have been a little bit churlish, but these were insurrectionists. These were people who burnt and injured police officers in their line of duties and others. And I have no time for them. We can say that, yes, he had a clear bias, but we've had David Carter. I think was in the same category. I think he had a clear bias. He had a number of women walk out and who were very unhappy in the way in which he was addressing their issues. What I am pleased about is Adrian Ruawhare coming in, because he's a rangamāori, a tātou fella. He's grassroots from Ratna, and I think he will be the step change that Parliament needs in terms of a speaker.
Speaking of Adrian Ruawhare, who hails from Ratana, the two MPs, one of them at least is one's Dan Rosewarne, and the other is Soraya Piki-Mason, also from Ratana. What can you tell us about her?
Well, Soraya is very experienced local body politician down Rangatiki, and it's being a very proactive Māori and a conservative Pākehā electorate and constituency is not easy. But you know what? She's a very likeable person. She does the work. She's a leader amongst the people from Ratana, but she's the type of person that when you go and visit her in marae, she's always in her wharekai. She's very harakeke grassroots person.
Yeah, Dan, the biggest casualty, I guess, from this will be Poto Williams. She's been stripped from that police portfolio. Was that a bit rough or fair enough?
Fair enough. Look, the gangs issue, the crime that's going on in this country has gotten out of control. The public see that, the Prime Minister sees that. Wherever you look, the gang numbers are up.
Have you got some Harvard stats for me on that?
No, I don't. But I do have a stat. The gang numbers are up 40%. In 4 years, right? So, look, this issue has gotten away from the Labour government, and so the Prime Minister knows that, and therefore, Poto Williams has fallen.
Whose is the 40% stat?
I think so. So basically, the police collect stats on people that they know are affiliated with gangs. It's a crude measure, so look, it's I'm not saying hand on heart that's true, but it's a significant rise.
We're going to talk about.
Can I just say on that stat
policy.
though? Can I just say on that stat? Jared Gilbert and others, including some of the police, said that the police themselves said, well, we need to be careful how those stats are sort of interpreted, because it actually shows an entry point in terms of people coming into gangs, but it doesn't show an exit point when people do leave the gangs. But I do accept that there has been a rise in gangs, and we have to have a look at why that occurs, because these things do not happen in a vacuum, folks.
How do you think Chris Hipkins will go in that portfolio?
I think he'll probably be able to hold the police to greater account. I don't think Poto did anything particularly wrong, but sometimes you just need a step change. You need sort of a new broom to come in and say to the police, hey, look, we need to have a look at this, folks. Things have not been as they ought to. And so sometimes just a change of leadership is enough to get some action. But it's got to be practical action, workable actions, and actions that strengthen communities and do not ruin communities.
Yeah, I think Chris Cahill this morning said it won't be politicians that make change. It'll be police boots on the ground.
And communities.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. But you've got to give police the authority and the powers to do that. And
what authority and what power do they not have, Daniel?
Well, this is what we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, we're going to talk about this soon.
The gang policy from national, and absolutely.
And one question, but I just want to get into Mika Whaitiri, because she's picked up food safety from Aisha Varel, who's picked up about 3 other roles herself. So Mecca's got customs, she's got veteran affairs and a number of associates, remembering that she was actually removed in 2018 as a minister. Is this a good sign for her?
Well, look, it seems like she's built back her credibility with the Prime Minister, and that's seen today. So, it was only, I think, 3-4 years ago where the Prime Minister said, hey, I've lost confidence in her as a minister. So, look, this is good news for Mecca. I think the portfolios are much more aligned. Customs, food safety, ag, there's a lot to overlap. So that's probably a good thing. So we'll see what she does in the portfolio.
Yeah. What are your thoughts?
Well, I thought removing her was marginal at best, tough was my sort of analysis. And you know what? She didn't spit the dummy. She just carried on doing the mahi in her electorate, and I think it just makes sense to bring some synergy for some of those portfolios that may not be too sexy but are really important.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to get into the gang policy, because you guys have been waiting. Nationals announced a plan to crack down on gangs and favours non-consorting laws to disrupt them, also granting police new powers and warrantless searches. Dan, tell me how this is going to make a difference.
Well, look, firstly, a lot of it is about direction, and I think that this is a good start. It's saying to gangs that this is enough. And so tone is very important. As Shane said before, leadership and a step change is required there. The second thing is actually the ideas from National basically giving police greater powers to control the gangs and get rid of them.
What more powers?
Well, things like banning gang patches in the public. They don't have that ability to do that right now.
And insignia. and
Yeah,
insignia.
exactly.
All right.
Yeah,
So
Hang on, carry on. What
yeah,
are
so
the other ones?
there's so as I said, the public had enough, and
So banning gang insignia in public. What are the other tougher ones?
so there's others around bringing in prohibition orders, firearms prohibition orders, which Labor's going through right now. They've got this law that's going through, but they've been sitting on it, and it's been too long, right? And so what we've been saying is, look, bring these prohibition orders in, so that if police suspect a gang member has a firearm in their car, they have the authority, the warrantless authority to go in and search that
Would you
vehicle.
support that?
Well, the warrantless authority already exists, and there's been over 700 issued only over in the next 1 or 2 years. This is political hyperbole, because how practically are you going to do this? All right, first of all,
Do you accept that, though, that warrantless
the-
searches exist?
Look,
700,
Mark Mitchell, the police
735.
spokesperson for National, he's getting feedback all the time from frontline
But
officers.
they do exist. But what he's saying is that
735.
they do exist. That you
But they
can
don't
get
have the actual authority. There's very specific rules in the legislation and thresholds that police have to meet before they actually go into a vehicle. And what they're basically saying is that all the threshold you'll need to meet is issuing these prohibition orders, and so police have greater authority to actually search these vehicles where there's possibly gang-related activity.
They have lots of authority under that specific act, as we all know, because I know lots of young Māori have been arrested or pulled up the side of the road under misuse of police. Look, the police and the community are going to sort this issue. It's really interesting. I haven't heard of one South Auckland leader, one West Auckland leader that does the mahi day in, day out, that have said, yeah, this is going to work. Because what it actually does, it disenfranchises communities that are already disenfranchised. Because you've got to remember, a tough police action like this not only has impact on gangs, but their whānau.
So what should the new police minister be doing? Because if we all agree that there has been an increase in gangs, what should be happening?
Well, I think what we've got to do is is where the law is broken, as it currently is, and people are sent to jail. If you commit a gun crime, you're going to go to court, right? Go to jail. But what you also got to do is you've got to empower your local community, and then you have to have a look at some of the big issues. When they talk about gang turf laws, you know what those are in effect? They're drug turf laws, and we have a criminalisation approach for the last 30 years in that space that simply doesn't work. We've got to look for new alternatives, and we've got to treat it as an addiction issue. We've got to treat it as a health issue, and we've got to take away the profit incentives that exist.
Look, it's just not happening. I mean, the minister admitted in 1 week there were 23 shootings on our streets. That is unacceptable. And no matter where you live in Auckland, the safety and security concerns that you face because of that is just unacceptable. So
It is.
how many of those 23 have actually been prosecuted or brought to justice?
I'm
And I
not
think-
disagreeing with
Yeah.
with the 23 shootings and the rest
Yeah.
of it. But when you look at some of the tough gang laws in Australia, and last year the Law Enforcement and Conduct Commission began reviewing some of those laws and found, actually the byproduct or the consequence of it is that Indigenous people get collected up, 3%. Indigenous people represent 3% of Australia, yet they are 40% of those who have been pulled up under those laws. Your own former MP, Chester Burrows, says they won't work.
They don't work.
What's new in them?
Well, look, Chester's, has his own view, and that's for him to have. But look,
It's a very educated one, and he's spent probably the last 3 decades working with youth and in crime.
yeah, but if you look at that same report, it says, look, actually what goes on in Western Australia, there are actually positive impacts from the legislative changes that they've made and given police greater
Serious
authorities.
crime's been static in Western Australia.
Yeah, but then,
As it has in New South Wales.
gang issues have dropped. I mean, I'm hearing that gangs actually go.
No, they've just gone
almost just given up on Western Australia. They're going to other states because it's just too hard for them.
No, they just go underground. There's a tough gang law war going on right at the moment in New South Wales, where they basically execute each other. It drives it underground. The other thing is that when we have the conversations about gangs, we really got to have a look at some of those familial gangs like the Mongrel Mob and the Black Power. I just want to know, Daniel, if there's a tangihana where I'm from in Kawerau, how are you going to enforce people wearing red bandanas or red T-shirts? It's just political hyperbole.
Let's just go back to what you were saying there. Never mind it being a gang problem. Let's talk about it as a drug problem, as as a medical problem. When did Labour do that? When did Labour address it and look at it that way? Because we couldn't even legalise marijuana.
Exactly. Well, I argued for it. I know Daniel didn't. Argued against it. Look, that you can't defend whether you be Labour or National in terms of our approach to this over the last 30 odd years. What we do is we think that bigger sentences, more people in jail fixes it. The reality is that crime actually has been declining, and if we think that we can imprison our way out of it, it wasn't that long ago we had 10,000 people in jail, and our crime rates were higher.
Let's wait and see what Chris Hipkins does in time to come. The Māori Electoral Option, interesting story. This one, the Māori Electoral Option, is a 4-month period held every 5 to 6 years, where Māori voters can choose to move, stay, whatever they want to do on the Māori or the general roll. So last week, Rawiri Waititi from the Māori Party's private member bill was drawn from the members' ballot, and it was a bill that would see Māori being able to just switch whenever they wanted to. And then, out of the blue, I don't know if it was out of the blue, but the Justice Minister Chris Whāwhoi announced that he'd draft a bill allowing Māori to change all the way up into the elections. National's come out and says it's racist. What's racist about that?
No, well, National hasn't come out and said it's racist. I mean, Nicola Willis, the deputy.
Reported.
Sorry, yes. Well, that's not what I'm hearing.
What'd she say?
Nicola Willis and Paul Goldsmith, the spokesperson on this matter, they've been very, very clear on this, which is, hey, look, if you want national support, which Labour will need national support in order to get these legislative changes through, they have a number of issues with the legislation as it's drafted. So the first thing is around tactical voting, which in fact the minister's already said, look, we will get rid of tactical voting for by-elections. So they don't want, if a by-election is held, for example, in Northcote, that people just can't switch for the by-election, right? So they've already accounted for that, but there's also local body elections where we need to think about, and general elections as well.
So you would support getting rid of tactical voting?
Well, I think. Would
you also would you support getting rid of sweetheart deals then, like the ACT Party in Epsom?
Well, that's a separate.
It's kind of tactical. It's tactical politics, isn't it? I mean, I'm just putting it to you because you're throwing it out there.
Look, I think with the issue that we've got to deal with is around the Māori electoral option, right?
Yeah.
So, and I can understand. I think I've spoken to many people on both sides.
Is it fair that for just those 5 to 6 weeks, Māori can choose for that 4-month period?
I think there are issues with it, and therefore that's why.
Fair?
Well,
fair.
Look, let's see whether Labour and National can get together and talk about it, because I think National will support it if they address the issue around tactical voting, proportionality, because remember, the key reason why it's every 5 years is because it aligns with the census cycle.
Yes.
Right? So that is a key cornerstone of our democracy, is making sure the seats are allocated in a way that best represent Māori across this country. So we've got to address that issue, and I'm sure National will be open to the discussion, and let's see where it goes. It's
a bottom line for Rawiri Waititi. The National Party says that it won't support it.
Well, it's humbug. It's a humbug argument that National Party is putting up. First of all, to have Paul Goldsmith, I live in Epsom, to say that this stops. I'm worried about people gaming the situation. He gamed the last couple of elections, so I just don't buy that. The other thing is people can only vote once. Remember that. They can only vote once. And what it means is that you can only make a choice for them to go to the Māori roll, to the general roll once in every 5 years, where half a dozen of your mates that live on the North Shore can come and live in your electorate and vote for you, and they could in fact change 2 or 3 times, because all they have to say is that they've been resident in that electorate for 1 month. And I think the rules are the rules, and they should be the rules for everybody. The other thing is that it limits Māori's participation in the democratic process. That's not a good thing. And also, to game it, you'd have to have a lot of cup of teas to do this, quite frankly, because to game it, you'd have to shift 2,000 to 3,000 Māori people from the general roll to a Māori roll to effective outcome. And I reckon if you're good enough to do that politically, as a political organiser, power to you, but it just ain't going to happen this way. This is shadow boxing.
But yeah, look, it's
Go, Dan.
it's because I'm in a marginal seat,
Yeah.
right? So in marginal seats, this is where it can be the difference between winning and losing an election.
But 200
hang
but
on,
200
hang on,
people,
Shane, hang
yeah.
on, Shane. Someone who's Māori could switch onto the general and give you their vote in the last week if they could see that you were marginal.
Well,
So,
last month.
but that's the thing is that should that be the
So
case?
you're saying you don't-
right? So in
What's wrong with that? What if Hear Me on the Shore wants to support you because
Yeah,
he
but
can say, I want Dan to get in there
they made
because he
their
wants a national
call that
MP who's Māori.
But they made their call that they wanted to be on the Māori roll.
But what
You know,
happened-
we
Hang
have,
on,
we
Shane,
have a
but you
simple
guys-
system, right, where
Yeah.
you get 2 votes. Everybody in this country gets 2 votes: local MP and the party vote. And that is the key.
But they're
is
not
that
getting
you
4 votes. They're still getting 2, aren't they?
still getting 2 votes.
Yeah, so what's the difference?
Well, the key thing is, again, you make your mind up where you want to vote on the electoral roll, right? So if you're Māori, and you can either vote on the Māori roll or the general roll. You make your call, and then it's for people like us to say, well, okay, that's who, here's the definition of the electorate that I want to represent. Now, all of a sudden, 2,000 or 3,000 more people come onto that. Then that's people that, of course, I don't know.
Give me, just quickly before we go to Shane to end, give me your whakaaro on the PM's visit to Australia. Do you think it went well, and do you think it'll make any changes for Māori living in Oz?
Well, look, I think certainly they've got a bit of a deep friendship there, and that's great, and I think that's positive for New Zealand Australian affairs. But in terms of the 501 issue, which is I think the big issue at the moment, we're not really seeing any movement. I don't see Albanese coming out saying, hey, we're going to change our stance. There's no interest in the Australian Prime Minister doing that. It plays very well for him domestically. But good on the Prime Minister for putting on the table, and that's what a Prime Minister should be doing.
How did it go for her?
I think it went very well. I think there will be some changes. I think that people who have got a certain level of crime won't be brought across to New Zealand. But actually, it's more than just the 501s. And here is the problem. As soon as Australian lands here, they have basically every right in the world. When New Zealand, you can have a Kiwi work there for 20 years, can't send the kids to university, can't apply for a job, for certain jobs. So I think that level of equity needs to be sorted.
Yeah, and look, we've got to work on the equitable association, absolutely.
Well, that's Party People for this week. So, ka nui te mihi ki te Puna Whakatongarewa mōna I tautoko I tēnei kaupō. Don't forget to watch us via the RNZ YouTube account and Facebook pages, or download us on the Apple Podcast. Kua tīpoko o te ahi kōrero, no horo mai rā.